Aloha, everyone. My name is Rob Hack. I'm from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council in Honolulu. We are a district export council, or DEC. We're one of 61 around the United States, and we are actually the most remote, and we cover the largest territory of all of the DECs because we are responsible for helping companies export from Hawaii and other Pacific islands such as CNMI and American Samoa. We are comprised of local business people who have experience in exporting, and our board members are vetted by the U.S. Department of Commerce and appointed by the Commerce Secretary, and it is our duty and pleasure to help Hawaii companies export. We are very thankful to get a grant each year from DBET, who in turn receives a grant from SBA in Washington, D.C., to be able to put on these webinars and hopefully soon back to seminars. And also we conduct lots of one-on-one company mentoring sessions and helping companies with their export issues. But as I mentioned, we have a grant from DBET, which is part of the HiSTEP program. And HiSTEP is the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program. And the State Trade Expansion Program, as mentioned, is from SBA. So we would very much like to thank SBA and DBET for the funding that allows us to put on these events. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mark Ritchie from DBET, who's going to explain a bit more about the HiSTEP program before we get into today's speakers. So Mark, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob, and aloha, everyone. Welcome to this session that HPEC has arranged. Looks like we have some great speakers, a very interesting topic. So my name is Mark Ritchie. I'm a branch chief in the Business Development and Support Division at DBET. And as Rob mentioned, we have received an SBA grant, and we've repeatedly received SBA grants over the years for the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program. We try to offer a comprehensive program to assist Hawaii companies to export their products and services, get their products and services beyond Hawaii. And with that in mind, we have three kind of components to the HiSTEP program, as Rob is showing you here on the shared screen. The first component is the Export Readiness Program, or the ERP, we call it. And that has sort of two parts. One of them is what we're doing right now, which is various sessions on export topics. And we've been doing it by Zoom, but we also try to do this in person sometimes, particularly as we come out of the pandemic, but we want to make it available statewide, so we always have a video component to it. But you can see all these different topics, everything from exporting to Australia, New Zealand, or other countries, Taiwan, China, South Korea, financing, logistics, and those sorts of topics. And those go throughout the year. Usually we start around November, December, and then go throughout the year through to about the fall. The other part of this is if you register with us, and on that first page, there was sort of a link to the registration. You tell us about yourself, and then this involves one-on-one business consulting or counseling, business advising. We work with our export partners, which include HPEC, Hawaii Pacific Export Council, the Small Business Development Centers, and then also the Patsy Mink Center for Business and Leadership. And after you register with us, you will be referred to a business advisor that'll arrange a one-hour meeting with you to discuss your export plans, what your needs are, and then try to see how we can sort of tailor things to help you and what your needs are to help you be successful. So that's all kind of the export readiness part of this. The second part we do in HiSTEP is we have Hawaii pavilions. This is where we have trade shows where we have a number of Hawaii companies that would want to go into these trade shows, and we actually construct a Hawaii pavilion in these places in Tokyo, or it could be an international show that's in the United States, but it has to have an international component to it or a global audience. We do all the booth build out, and then we make it really easy then for companies to go in at a very low cost, subsidized cost, to actually exhibit at these shows. So one of them that is going on this week, my colleague Jamie Lum is there right now, the Natural Products Expo West in Los Angeles. That's a global show. We have a number of Hawaii companies that are doing things kind of in the natural products area. So we thought that was a nice fit. And then you can see some of the other ones that we do. We do a life science show. We have a food, we do a lot of food kind of related shows and things. So that's the Hawaii pavilions. There's a separate application for those, and we start doing recruiting, months in advance for these shows so that we can sort of get our sort of contingent of Hawaii companies ready to go there. The third component of the HiSTEP program is what we call company assistance. And that is where if you don't want to go to one of these shows, but you do want some assistance, we can actually pay for some of the travel, getting booth space in other countries, and help you be successful. There's a lot of different costs that we could actually pick up. There's an application process, and it is a competitive process for this. And usually we start the applications at the end of each year. So usually, it comes out, it's a little bit clunky, but sort of as an RFP type application. You respond to us, and we usually are making our awards in January. So for this year, we've already made all of our awards in January, and those companies then will be using those funds to pay for trade show booth space, travel, and a lot of other costs. There's a pickup on e-commerce costs, shipping costs, and a number of other things. This year, we were able to offer up to $15,000 to companies to help subsidize some of their export development related costs. And with that, I will turn it back over to Rob so we can start our program for the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. I'd just like to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded, and I will do some minor editing to it and upload it to our YouTube archive here at, if you go to YouTube and search for Hawaii Pacific Export Council, you'll see a list now. It's approaching 80 seminars and webinars. This was back here in the days when we had live seminars, and then these are all the webinars up here. So it takes about a week for this to be edited and uploaded, but I will send out a message to the attendees when this is ready. Our first speaker today is Casey Swanson. She's joining us from Washington, D.C., and she's from the Coalition of Services Industries. So Casey will spend a few minutes telling us about her organization and then talking about services exports. So Casey, please proceed. You're on mute, Casey.
Oops, thanks very much. Let me just quickly share my screen here. And one moment. All right. So, hi, my name is Casey Swanson. I work for the Coalition of Services Industries, and thanks for inviting me here today. I'm going to talk about the U.S. services export economy. But first, I'll just talk a little bit about where I work. And just to be clear, we're a trade association. We're completely separate from the government. We've been around for about 40 years. And our goals really on behalf of our member companies are to promote awareness of the role of services in the US economy, and especially to focus on the trade piece, because our members are all exporters basically. And we have a really broad membership. Our members range from information and communication technology services, financial services. We have media and entertainment, retail, professional services, which I understand a number of folks on the call today are in professional services. But what our members have in common and really care about is services and digital trade. digitally enabled services. So we work to promote trade policies that will open more foreign markets and make it easier for US service providers to sell abroad. So we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do. The first thing to note about services is just how important it is domestically, despite the fact that I think manufacturing, kind of looms large in the public imagination. Services are over 2/3 of the US economy, and that was $13 trillion in 2019. So really, really talking about big volume of dollars there. Also, if you think about, I know my job, probably your jobs, if you think about your friends, the majority of Americans work in some kind of services capacity, about 82%, according to the most recent data. So it's very important. The kind of policies that we employ towards services are really important. Another point we always like to make is that services are not only important in themselves, but really they're more and more being incorporated into goods. And some of that you may not even realize when it's happening. But the bottom line is that services make US goods more competitive too. Some of that can happen during the manufacturing process. For example, if you think about making semiconductors, a really complex process, chip makers may use what are called big data analytics to estimate the performance of a range of a product across different variations. And then there's stuff that goes along with sales and delivery. If you go to buy something online, by the time that you receive that product, there may have been, marketing, payments, insurance, logistics, to take just a couple of examples. All those services are going into the making and the marketing and delivery of the product before it even gets to you. And you don't really think about that when you get whatever you ordered, say, online. And then sometimes services are a very important part of the value proposition of a good, and they make it more appealing. And a simple example is, people pay a lot for Teslas because it's like movable software, basically. It's not just an analog box on wheels, the way cars used to be. So not only looking at services exports now, not only are services important for the domestic economy, but the US really leads globally in services exports. And just really briefly, I'll note there are two kinds of exports. There's the stuff where you go abroad and open an office and you sell stuff from that office, say in Japan. Last year, the US, or the most recent year for which we have data available, the US delivered, I think it was 1.7 trillion of services sold from foreign offices. The kind of services that we're focusing on today are cross-border, where, say, you as an architect in Hawaii are you're delivering a blueprint to somebody in China, say. That's a cross-border service where you actually provided the service in the US, but it was digitally delivered. And that in itself is nearing close to 1 trillion in volume at this point. So we're talking really, really big numbers. And just to briefly note too, within the category of services, the US generally has a big trade surplus in services exports, but some of the biggest are in professional services is one of those areas where we just have a very sophisticated population of people who are providing professional services, and they can command a premium for their products. So just to give you a few examples, R&D services, these are all part of what is considered professional services that the government gathers data on. Management consulting, architecture and engineering, legal, advertising, education. Those are all really important services. And just to mention, you may have heard of what's called USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. It's the updated version of NAFTA. Professional services is important enough that there's a special, it's called the services chapter of the trade agreement. There's an annex just on professional services to try to promote more cooperation between Mexico and Canada, and get all three countries to recognize each other's accreditations to make it easier for exports to travel among those three countries. So I thought that was interesting, and it says something about how important professional services is. Another important point to note is that services are more and more being digitally delivered. It was a trend we've seen for some time, but the past couple of years have really speeded it up a lot. The good news about digitally delivering services is it opens up potentially the whole world to you, because you can reach customers much more easily if you can deliver a service via the internet. On the other hand, something we work on a lot at CSI, more countries are becoming protectionist and they're erecting digital trade barriers to make it a little harder for US exporters to deliver their services. But that said, just looking at this shift, I'm sure many of you personally stepped up your use of the internet during the pandemic, whether for working, buying things, entertaining, and maybe for your kids, for studying. And you can really see that borne out in the trade numbers. Obviously, the internet's been around a long time, but in the first few quarters of 2021, exports of computer-related services, that's stuff like software, anything, data processing of all kinds, cloud storage, that was up 30%. So it's a huge jump at this point, kind of late in the game. And by comparison, for a similar period in 2021, overall services exports were still below the pre-pandemic period. And that's because things like travel and international education were really disrupted as people stayed home. So digital services were kind of a winner within that period. I just wanted to bring this back to something now that matters to all of us, which is pay. The title of this presentation is Why Do Services Exports Matter? And from a big picture perspective, they make the US more globally competitive and help our economy. But at an individual level, if you work at an export-oriented company, you stand to earn more money. There was research by the US International Trade Commission, which is part of the government, that found that higher earnings can be partly explained by better education and experience. But even after controlling for those factors, there remains a premium for export-intensive services. And possibly it reflects that the companies that are in a position to export have extra competitive services, and that carries over into what they have to pay with their workers. But I thought that was an interesting detail. Now, I just have a couple more slides, but I also wanted to highlight how much services trade matters specifically to Hawaii. And you can really see in the numbers here how much Hawaii's services trade has grown recently. Less than 10 years, it's up nearly 1/3. And where do Hawaii's services exports go? Just to briefly note, I guess, given Hawaii's location, it's not surprising, China, Japan, South Korea, all near the top. But the EU, a huge market, and the UK markets are really important and very sophisticated markets. And then, of course, Canada and Mexico, which are covered by the USMCA trade agreement. So you have some extra protections there, are also big destinations. I did want to make note of some of the challenges that exporters tend to encounter. And that is why we at CSI spend a lot of time pushing for trade commitments to help our foreign trading partners commit to improving their business environment. So what are the obstacles companies encounter? These responses are from a survey the US Chamber of Commerce conducted just a couple of years ago. You could select more than one response, but these were the top responses. As you might expect, countries have different customs procedures that can be complicated. And briefly to mention, trade agreements really focus on streamlining and simplifying customs procedures. So that can be a very beneficial aspect of having a trade agreement with another country. Communications, that relates to different foreign customer habits and language difficulties, which you're of course it's going to be an issue in a foreign country. Regulations, that's a really broad category. And that can include things like a lot of countries in the EU in particular has fairly complex privacy regulations, which can require some work to understand and adhere to. Tax challenges, there's something called data localization, where foreign countries may require you to keep your data within the borders of that country rather than consolidate it with the rest of your data back in the US. And that can be difficult. Just skipping to the end here, lack of information, payment collection. There are provisions in USMCA, for example, that clarify that countries, the US, Mexico, and Canada really need to make it easy for companies to transfer payments across borders to enable services. So there are interesting aspects of trade agreements that you may not have thought of that can really make that can make exports flow more smoothly. So those barriers I just outlined are why CSI exists, and we work with the U.S. government and also trading partners to push for commitments to make it easier for service suppliers to export. And just to end here are a few of the basic provisions we would hope to see in a trade agreement. Top of the list is expanding market access, especially in developing economies. A lot of them have fairly weak commitments in the WTO, so it can be hard for US companies to break into the market. They may have limits that restrict your investment or sales. Trade facilitation provisions, they increase transparency and make it easier for companies to abide by customs procedures. Also requiring governments to be transparent about their licensing or service authorizations is another important piece. And the last one, which is a really big one for CSI, is to make sure it's easy for companies to transfer data across borders and prevent countries from requiring that you keep data within their territory. That can be very expensive, especially for small companies. So right now we're hopeful that the US government will pursue a digital trade agreement as part of what's called, you may have heard President Biden has proposed, it's called the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework with our trading partners in the Asia Pacific region. So we're working a lot on that and hopeful that we'll see some good results going forward. So I've covered a lot of territory today, so I will conclude there and thank you for your time and look forward to any questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Casey. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm just curious, how do companies join your organization? How do they get to be part of the coalition?
Right. Well, you feel free to reach out to me, and I can, I will connect you with my boss. But basically, a lot of our companies are certainly export oriented, and yeah, feel free to get in touch, and I can provide you with some information.
Okay, wonderful. And there's a few other questions that have come in, but I'm going to wait until the very end because I think that our other speakers could chime in and answer some of these questions as well with you. Our first services exporter speaker today is Robert Zheng from WATG. And Robert, I will share your presentation. Just bear with me.
Thanks, Rob.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Great.
Perfect. Great. Aloha. Good morning, good afternoon, or maybe good evening, wherever you are. Thank you, Rob, for giving me the opportunity to share our exporting service experiences in the last almost 8 decades. I would say 7 decades, probably. The picture I want to see, I just want you to take a notice that the gentleman in the middle, that's Pete Wimberly. He's the founder of this firm, WATG. That was when he took the flight to the South Pacific, particularly in French Polynesia and Fiji, to expand the markets of this firm from a purely local to international. That's the initial step. I'm going to refer that later in my presentation. Okay, can you see my, okay, yeah. So WATG, we started in 1945. It's an architecture firm. The first project we did happened to be the renovation of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. It's still one of the, I would say 2 probably most historic hotels in Waikiki. And after that, the firm made a decision to be specialized in the design of hospitality instead of a broader range of building types design. They really like the hotels. They found it's a lot of challenge and a lot of knowledge to gain. So they decided to do that. But in order to be specialized for an architecture firm, to be specialized in hospitality design, the one thing they realized back in the 50s, it's probably about 10 years after the firm's inception, they decided that they have to go overseas because one single market is too small to sustain a business. So they decided to go international. So the previous picture I showed, that's the first step. They look at the map, the early founders, and see the lands. Probably the closest the lands they can see from Hawaii is the South Pacific slightly closer than West Coast. And they see more similarities from culturally, from the climate. So they decided to go to check out what's going on over there. And eventually we got some commissions from Tahiti. I mentioned that Hotel Bora Bora, that's the first above the water, next slide, villa hotels in the world. We designed that back in the end of 1950s. And then from there went to Fiji, continued to go west, New Zealand, Australia, and eventually we landed in Singapore. That's the first stop in the Asian continent. And that brought us to a lot of opportunities in that land. So in order to export to the foreign countries, the foreign markets, maybe my back a little bit is just instead of selling tangible products, exporting services, I think they have some characteristics. Number one, it's intangible because the consumers cannot really touch it, see it before they buy it. So the products you're going to provide for them is going to be, once they make a decision to buy, then you start to produce for them. So it's intangible. It requires definitely most of the time is the experience and face-to-face meetings. So you have to go to meet them, to see them, to build the trust of them so they can make the consuming decision to buy your product, which is a service. So when we land in Singapore, we realized there's a huge market in the Asian continent. So we were very committed to it. Send people on a regular basis, back even in those days, that's in the 70s, and then almost on a monthly basis. And then eventually we set up an office in that continent. That's the first office in Singapore. That's back in the 90s. So I would say in order to export, you need to show some commitments to the markets over there. And then from there, and then how you can penetrate your markets from one single market, Singapore in this case, to the rest of the continent, is a very vast markets over there. It's hard to know who are the potential clients is. So instead of you knock at the doors and chasing the clients or potential clients you identify, it is very effective to help your potential clients find you. And how do you do that? It's really you through the working relationships of the first project, you can start to build a network, knowing the consultants working in the project, of course, knowing some clients. You really build a long-term relationships with them. So help them who have the trust in you, in your service, to spread the word, to really do the marketing for you. So through the design process in our experiences, you work with all the stakeholders in the process. Like in our case, we design hotels. So it's really the operators, the hospitality feasibility consultants, and some master planners, and some local design collaborators we call design institutes. You treat them as really a stakeholder in setting the whole experiences to the clients. You help them to understand our business practice, and then they can actually refer some good business. Or if it's a client, probably give us repeat business to us. So keep that in mind. That's a very effective way. And then in a word, I would say is really let the client come to you instead of you go to identify them and chase them. And other things in that culture, in the Oriental culture, If you just knock the door, approach them directly, you kind of doesn't demonstrate enough credential. But if you got a third-party endorsement refer you, the acceptance level from the potential clients will be much greater. Like for this project in Jeju, as a JW Marriott, the client actually is a Chinese client. We worked with them on some projects in China, but also in this case, we were recommended by the operator, Marriott Group, to recommend us to this project. So use the consultants, various consultants in the design process helps a lot. And then once you get a project, the next one is really, you make sure you do a great products for them. You deliver a great service for them. That takes your dedication, your diligence, and doing a lot of research really to know their culture, the customs, the histories, and study the sites carefully to really identify the good features and some constraints and limitations of the physical side to see how you can take advantage of the good features and turn around the limitations, the constraints of the site into a great guest experiences. So in this case, we designed in the Philippines. That's for a very eco resort. They want to have almost the least touch with the nature, try to maintain it, its authenticity, its originality. So we try to talk our design well blended with the natural contour, with the natural landscape in a very kind of forest area. And then you probably will hear quite a lot of, it's a Chinese word called guanxi, which means relationship. You probably get some advice from experts saying, in order to do business over there, you have to build a guanxi, then the business will come over. From our experiences, that's not the case. Of course, you need to build good relationships, but you do not do so just for the sake of relationships. You do so through providing great services to them, through showing your design integrity, your business integrity. So that's why doing a good job, deliver a good service for the clients, that's the best guanxi you can build up, which will lead to more repeat businesses or referral business, as I said. So don't just spend a lot of time just kind of building relationships. I'm trying to say is a focus on potential opportunities and then invest wholeheartedly into that and make the best out of it. Another question probably you'll face quite often is when you come to our markets, because you're doing exporting, then you have to change your business practice from Western business practice or US business practice to local. I think that's also, I would say, it's a lot of misreading on that. You are, at least in our case, is US firm, and you are being perceived as a US firm. So you are expected to conduct the business more like in the Western business practice, even though people or some experts might advise you, you have to change it. You may have to twist a bit, I would say, but by essence, you need to maintain the business practice that where you come from. So in this case, I would say is even if in a climate, the legal framework is not that transparent or not that sophisticated, I would say, like, for example, you still need to have a decent contract to really stipulate the terms, the deliverables, and also the payment terms over there. We do, I say, change a little bit is when we realize that some markets, even Japan these days, I'm surprised to know that they do ask for a discount. China is particular, India is more so, I can tell you. So in lieu to that effect, when you propose your fee, you may need to factor that in a little bit by adding a markup. Like if they always ask, let's say 10%, sometimes 15%. And then you know that they're going to do that because if you do not give them that room, And whoever is doing the negotiation from their organization, if they do not get any discounts from us, it shows to his or her bosses that he or she is not doing a good job. So after you realize that, you may add some rooms for negotiation. Like in our case, if I know pretty much for sure, just add a 10%. So that's a bit of twist of our business practice, but you still maintain the fees that you want to get if the project were in the States or in other Western markets. So, I'm not saying you cannot change it at all, but I would say keep the essence of the business practice in the foreign markets over there. That's also very important. Another thing is how much you really should know the culture. I would say it's very good if you, as I say, as setting exporting the services, I think you need to go to really meet people face to face, the critical part, in order to really build the relationship over there. So you need to show some at least appreciation for their culture, for their custom, for their history, in order to really cherish the relationships and build a stronger relationships. You can talk about the families and politics and whatever they're interested in. I can tell a lot of people ask political questions, which is quite uncommon in our business practice in here. They like to talk about it. We just have to accommodate that. But I would say don't try to know too much about the culture to the degree that you are not even sure of which business practice you need to really stand on. If that affects your decision on that, I would say you're trying too hard. I would say stop. Don't knowing too much of their culture. As I said earlier, you still need to really insist on the business practice, our business practice in the foreign land. A lot of things, much has been said about the payments or bad stories of payments, which is true in our experiences. Korea and Japan are pretty exceptional. They do good payments, pretty much follow the contract terms. But once you go into emerging markets, Vietnam's and India, a lot of stories from India, and China, of course. You can see a lot of firms got burned out, cannot collect the money over there. In our case, we had some cases over there, but we managed that quite well. So the good news I want to tell you is it can be manageable. If you do your work, do your job in a very diligent way to manage the project. We do ask, in our case, 20% of mobilization fee. In much more developed markets in Japan, Korea, we may ask 10%, at least 10%, maybe 15%. But in China, we definitely ask for 20%. That's the initial payment. It's part of the design fee contract value. And then really, really firm in really enforcing the payment schedule. They will always delay you for all kinds of reasons. You need to find a way to hold your ones firm, but of course in a charming way. In our case, you just really need to hold some deliverables until they clear the previous payments. So it can be done in that way. They will understand, to be honest. If you have using too much their culture, and then they can see there's a room to squeeze us, and they may do so. But if you're firm enough, I just say, this is our business practice. Our company will not allow me to continue to staff this project if you do not pay us. They will get it. It's just the way how you do it. Of course, you have to be very diligent on monitoring the payments, very constant timely communication with them. If you can go there, always kind of pick up the phone. Don't rely on the emails. I would say face-to-face meeting is the best in terms of efficiency in communication. Then the phone calls, then the emails, and so on. When you work on one project, don't be enticed by more opportunities down the road. In our experience is just focus on the first project. You can tell the clients, because they always come, hey, can you kind of loosen up a little bit the terms, and because we have more projects down the road. I would say don't get into that kind of conversation. Just say, Mr. Client, let me focus on energy do a first project for you in an exceptional way, deliver great service for you. Then if you're happy with our services, then we'll move on a second project. In other words, don't discount your business terms in luring of more potential projects. Because if you do that, it's going to be meaning more problems down the road. Yeah, so in our experiences, let's take in China, for example, our bad debt ratio in that market, let's say in the last 20 years, I did a quick comparison. It's not that bad, actually, slightly even better than that from the US markets. So what I'm saying is you probably have heard much about the issue of the bad payments, but if you work really diligently, it can be managed to a very good level. And then sometimes you may feel, oh, the booming time probably is just over, or it's in the middle of it. Maybe we're too late to enter the markets. I can tell you there's no such thing. The key is if your products, your service is what they need, no matter what the timing of it, you can always go sell to them. I take the Vietnam's case, probably almost 20 years ago, we started to look at that market, and then they had a little booming at that time. And when we realized that, we thought probably it's too late. So we sent a partner to go there to do some scouting research, talking to the people, and they realized that, yeah, it is a bit too late. So it's not actually ready for us yet. So we decided to not make any investments into the Vietnam. We did almost 10 years, and then realized that looks like it's a part of a new wave of developments we can jump in. So that's when we never give up that market. Always pay attention to it, but I can tell you there's always good timing to get into it. So there's no such thing as just being too late. And then your success in your home country. In our case, our success in designing good projects in the US always help us to penetrate, to get a good recognition from the overseas markets, because they see US is much more competitive, it's much more professional markets, much mature. So if we can succeed in that market, showing good examples of the projects, they can help them or convince them that we are the right firm. So always leverage on your success in your home markets over there, then can sell your products overseas more effectively. For us in Hawaii, it's been people always ask us, you want to promote a Hawaiian firm, promote us as position us as a US firm. We realize that a US brand is very strong. When people buy the products from the foreign countries, they choose, usually they choose the country first. So in this case, the service, as Casey said, it's US is really a great, very good example in exporting services, because we do good services. So we kind of use more promoting as a more a US product in the beginning, but tie in with Hawaiian touch. In this case, the way to work with a team as a kind of ohana concept, which is a family, bring all the stakeholders in the process and treat them all like an ohana member. They like that. And then when it comes out tourism developments, and they also definitely see Hawaii as a brand name over there. So we put both US brands in the beginning, and on top of that, we add in Hawaii touch to it, and that help us to conduct and build a good relationships, or trustful relationships to them. Our experiences on that. And then another thing is, in the end, is if you see a lot of opportunities, you see successful stories, you still have to evaluate your own case. What is the value proposition of your service to other markets? And I would say really do some research and wait and see. Talk to a lot of people, and even go there, like we did in Vietnam back in the 90s. Talk to the people. You'll have the best understanding from meeting with them, talking with them, experience the culture of them. Then you can make a better decision in terms of whether you want to enter that market, whether you want to go in, and when to go in, and whom could be your potential stakeholders and partners in helping you to reach out to some potential clients in other markets. So yeah, don't rush. Just do your research. and it can be very fruitful in exporting your services to the markets. That's my presentation, Rob.
Wonderful, Robert. Thank you so much. That was extremely insightful, and we appreciate hearing the opinion. Our next speaker is Herman Kugler from Mackay Ocean Engineering, and he's going to tell us about his experiences with exporting of engineering services.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Just confirming you all can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, perfect. All right, yeah, so my name's Herman Kugler. I work for Mackay Ocean Engineering. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the company, the services we provide, and then, yeah, happy to answer any questions after as well. So this slide is our very high-level overview of the company. So we've been in business for nearly 50 years. Next year will be our 50th anniversary. And we have about 39 employees. I think that number is actually going to be 40 in the next couple weeks. We're hiring one more and trying to hire two more. So if you know any engineers, we're in desperate need. Shown here, these three groups are kind of those that are that stand up the company. So the first is our subsea cable software. And if you've heard of Mackay, if you've heard of our name either within Hawaii or elsewhere, it's likely because of our work with subsea cable software. So we provide a commercial software to about 90% of the subsea cable fleet that's used to basically plan and install cables, both telecommunications and power cables. The next group is our ocean energy division. And the name is a little deceiving, I guess you could say. This is not only ocean and marine renewable energies, but also pipeline designs. And I'll go into more detail on why those are combined. But this is another area where you see it all, plastered all over our website, and we were in the local news in Hawaii and international renewable energy news, at least, for our work with OTEC a few years back. We have the world's largest OTEC plant that's connected to the U.S. grid. And then the final group is the DoD Science and Technology and Ocean Engineering Group. That group does a lot of research and development of hardware and software systems, largely for our government customers. And a lot of those surround, subsea robotics and innovative cabled systems. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on each of these groups in the next slide. So again, this slide covers our subsea cable software. So this is, it's largely been a commercial success more on the product side. We sell software licenses, but what we started doing as of, maybe 5 years back, and it's kind of a large revenue source for us now, is actually providing services on our customers' vessels. So we actually will operate this software for our customers on their vessels. And that's something that, Casey kind of alluded to in the past, where you can kind of tie, services to products. So this product, or these products, there's three software packages that we have generated over $35 million in revenue for our company and for the state of Hawaii. And, that success has also given us several local awards for export, for our export success. And this is a large part of the company, and it's growing in recent years as well. So we sell our software for both commercial and DoD cables. Traditionally it was for the telecommunications industry. We would sell our software to, people like AT&T and Verizon, let's say. But now, with the shift of the market, people are interested in fiber optics for internet, so data transfer. So now we're seeing our customers more being on the side of those large tech companies, like, let's say, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, and that's one thing that I definitely stress. If you are going to be exporting, is keep an eye out for those changes in markets. If a new market is opening up, make sure that you're on top of it. We started this software in 1983, right before the .com boom. So we kind of cemented our place within this industry. So this slide goes over our Ocean Renewable Energy Group. And as I mentioned, this also includes pipeline designs. So this is what really started out our company. In 1973, we were doing a lot of these ocean thermal energy conversion and seawater air conditioning projects. And both of these are renewable energies that basically use large diameter deep seawater pipelines. And they use that deep seawater as a renewable energy resource. So the first one, seawater air conditioning, that's just using the deep seawater as a cooling source for buildings. And then ocean thermal energy conversion, or OTEC, is basically using the temperature differential between warm surface seawater and deep seawater, and using that temperature differential to run an organic Rankine cycle. So it basically turns a turbine. So it's kind of like a steam power plant, as you can imagine, but instead of burning coal or something like that to develop your vapor, you're basically using warm seawater to vaporize a working fluid, and then deep seawater to condense it. Now, the other part of this slide is the pipeline designs. And this is one thing that I definitely want to point out in this webinar specifically, because this is, again, an area where we adapted our services based on the markets. So, as I mentioned, we started out doing these large diameter pipeline designs for renewable energies, but we saw there's other applications for these large diameter HDPE or plastic pipelines. So we've become, the world leader in these pipeline designs for all sorts of applications. So you can think of, industrial intakes for power plants. We did one a couple of years back, maybe 3 years back, in Egypt it was the world's largest power plant. So we did, some intakes and outfalls for their cooling system. As of recently, the Middle East is doing a lot of desalination projects. So in the last 2 years, we've had about 5 projects in the Middle East where we're developing designs for, again, these large diameter pipelines for their desalination system intakes. And again, there was another project just this year that was the world's largest desalination system. We developed the pipeline deployment design for that system. So the big key here is, even though we're a small business, only, like I said, under 40 people at the moment, and we're in this remote location in Hawaii, we're still able to lead in some very key technologies. And that's, again, because of our ability to kind of adapt based on market needs. I'll go through this one pretty quickly. I already mentioned it. Seawater air conditioning, it basically just uses the deep seawater to cool buildings. This is a technology that is economically viable today. This has been built commercially in several locations. The biggest success is actually in the city of Toronto. So they're not using seawater in that case, they're using deep lake water. But we were involved with that program, and that basically, it's a district cooling system. So the whole city of Toronto basically is using deep lake water to cool their buildings during the summers. And it can reduce energy consumption by 90%. So this is something that we're pushing to a lot of coastal communities or communities that have access to deep seawater. This slide just goes over our what we do within that pipeline group, besides the seawater air conditioning and OTEC. So we will do anything from just simple hydrodynamic modeling. So if a client comes to us and they say, hey, we've already developed the design, we want you to, check the hydrodynamics of the intake of this system. We will do that. That's a small project, or we'll do, a full design, and we'll do the deployment overview as well. So we'll be on site during deployments, and that's another thing I'd like to stress is if you are a small business in Hawaii, be open to kind of modifying your services based on what your clients want. A lot of larger engineering companies will only be involved in a project if they're the prime and if they're taking it from initial, concept to installation. Now, what we have to do as a small business is we have to say, okay, that's fine if someone else is priming it. They can do the deployment. We can handle the design, or even further, like I said, where someone has already done the design and we will do kind of the specialized modeling. This slide is just a brief overview on ocean thermal energy conversion. Shown on the right there is our OTEC plant in Kona. So again, this is probably what you may have heard of our name of. In 2015, we commissioned this plant and turned it on and connected it to the grid. So that was a big step for OTEC and Ocean Renewable Energies. We've been doing research and development, like I said, since the 1970s. This is what started our company, and we are really the world leader in OTEC. So if you Google OTEC, Mackay will come up first. So we've had the first grid-connected closed cycle OTEC plant. It's been funded by DoD largely. We've also had funding from Department of Energy. And then, beyond just the research and development side, we have, commercial clients coming to us. We have a few projects a year where a client will come to us and say, hey, can you check our site and see if it's suitable for OTEC? So we do a lot of feasibility studies for OTEC, and our work in OTEC has received over $30 million in related revenues since the 1970s. The final group is our Subsidy Technologies group. As I mentioned earlier, this is largely for our DoD clients. So we do a lot of autonomous underwater vehicles. We do a lot of cabled systems for the Navy. And this is not so much a commercial or an export market, I guess, for us, you'd say, but it's something that we're pursuing. We're trying to figure out how we can leverage some of these technologies that we've developed under federal funding and, move it into the commercial markets. So we've had some good success, but this has only been, within the U.S. as of late. One project I like to point out is the one in the top right. That has actually gone from an SBIR phase 1, and we're actually up to a phase 3 now. We're conducting a phase 3. So if you're a small business and aware of SBIRs, getting to a phase 3 is kind of the next step to commercialization. So hopefully after we're done with this phase 3, we can start transitioning it to, the actual DoD fleet, and then again to commercial markets in the near future. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know mine was more of an overview of our company and not a training course, I guess you'd say, on how we export. But if you have any questions on how we do it, I'm happy to answer.
Great. Thank you very much, Herman. Wonderful. Herman was our final speaker of the day, so I'm going to open it up to any questions. If there are any, please type them into the Q&A area or text them to me. as some people often do. There was a question on trade shows, and I think that's an interesting question. Have Robert or Herman, have you been involved in any kind of international trade shows that are specific to your industry? There must be something.
Yes. In our case, we attended some trade missions, I think organized by Department of Commerce in the early days, or to some emerging markets. We found it's good, useful to build some good connections with the particular markets, but it's not that effective in terms of meeting the real potential clients. So I think for kind of initial strategy, I think it's good to go along with some trade missions with them. Trade shows particularly, I would say we try, in our case, we don't attend. Actually, I don't even record any trade shows, because trade shows to me is more like for tangible products. When we're selling the services, I think it's more comes down to really building the relationships. That's our experiences. I'm curious to see what Herman will say about it.
Yeah, we definitely, same kind of thing that Robert said. We do attend trade shows for our subsea cable software, because that is a product. That's kind of the perfect setup for that one. But what we do a lot as well is we go to technical conferences. So getting in front of, I know there are conferences for, large diameter pipeline designs, let's say. And, you have everyone there from the engineers like us to the contractors to project owners. If someone is about to upgrade their facility, let's say, so a wastewater treatment plant says, hey, we need to extend our pipeline based on, new EPA regulations. That's something that's happened. They will go to these events prior to, actually upgrading their facilities, just to get a lay of the land and figure out who they can potentially work with. So I definitely suggest looking at those kind of industry specific conferences and expos based on what you are actually doing. And there's an easy way to do it. If you just type in the word international after you say, let's say pipeline, HDPE pipeline conference, and then you just put in the word international, you can see all sorts of, ones that definitely tout how many different countries are attending and different attendees are going. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, if I can add a note to that, is really you look at where you can reach your potential clients mostly. Those are the events you should go attend. In our case, we kind of position ourselves more so to the hotel industry or hospitality industry versus the design industry. So we do go, but we rarely go much on the design focused events, maybe for our designers, but for me, business development. I go to hotel investment conference where you can meet the potential investors and clients, and also the collaborators like hotel operators and then some other master planners and the feasibility study guys. So those are the events we do sponsor and attended.
Great, thank you. The next question is a comment for Robert and a question for Herman. Robert, you did a really good job of talking about American versus Hawaii and marketing your services that way. And I think if anybody thinks about architecture services for a resort, it would make sense to them that a global leader is in Hawaii. However, I don't think many people outside of Hawaii will think of Hawaii as a hotbed of engineering activity, Herman. So I'm curious, how do you go out into the world and talk about the excellent company that you have and the excellent engineers you have? How do you market that and get customers to believe that there is such a thing in Hawaii.
Yeah, so for a couple of the markets, it's easy. You know, for our DoD market, where we're doing research and development and testing things in the waters right at our office here at the pier, you know, it's an easy explanation. We say, you know, we have the water right outside of our office doors. You know, we can test this thing. We're in the perfect location for this work. And I'd say it's the same thing for our work with ocean thermal energy conversion and seawater air conditioning. You know, we have that deep seawater resource close to the islands of Hawaii. You know, OTEC is kind of, or Hawaii rather, is one of the only places within the U.S. that would actually use OTEC. So it makes sense there. That said, on the cable software, we don't necessarily market either way. We don't necessarily say, you know, tout that we're a Hawaii company, or, you know, say we're a US company even by that. We really let the software speak for itself. You know, it's the industry leader. So we don't really need to say where it's from. We just say, hey, we're working globally. You know, 90% of the fleet worldwide is using this. So there's no reason basically for a client to question us in that case of where we are. And then I'd say on the pipeline design, you know, outside of seawater air conditioning and OTEC, that is another market that's a little hard for us to kind of show that we have that expertise because we are in this little office in Hawaii. So doing these large projects in Toronto and all over the US and worldwide, what we like to do there is just make those connections to local companies. And it's, again, not necessarily saying, you know, because we're a Hawaii company, we're best suited, or because we're a US company, we're best suited. It's just saying, you know, look at our past experience. You know, the pipeline designs that we've done, we've never had a failed pipeline installation, which is another problem that you know, other companies will have. We can basically, you know, quote those as why we are the right person. And then, like I said, we partner with local contractors and companies that will basically help us kind of speak to the project owners and describe why Makai is right for them.
Well, can I just add a quick note to that? Is, yeah, in our case, I said, selling the service is really about building relationships with people. So I think the Hawaii approach of the Aloha Spirit I mentioned, or Hana approach, really help us in the early stage to build a stronger personal relationships, which helps us to really get the projects penetrating into the markets. We are very conscious about the Hawaii brand. Of course, we don't want to be pigeonholed as a firm only doing the resort, because we are also doing a lot of residential projects and also urban mixed use mega projects as well. So we use the Hawaiian flavor touch to, I would say, build relationships and then help us to really get the type of projects that usually people may think Hawaii firm cannot do. Because once you have the relationship and trust from the clients, they will trust you. As Herman said, you will consolidate all the resources and expertise to deliver the services they need from us. So that's we need to combine those two together.
Really interesting and very insightful. Thank you. Casey, here's a question for you. The data that you showed about Hawaii exports, there's a question of where did you get that data, and the people would like to mine that data a little bit more. For example, I think the EU was the #1 export market for Hawaii services. So our questioner is curious, where did that data come from, so they can look for more of that data.
Well, we actually have a research organization called Trade Partnership do that work for us as a trade association, and we post state level data on our website. So that's where we get it. I will note too that you can dig around on the Commerce, or it's called BEA, the Bureau of Economic Analysis websites, and you can get all the data you want and more on export statistics. And usually within the EU, it's broken down by country. So you can get even more specifics there. I would recommend, if you want to really do a deep dive, you might want to check the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and you can, just Google and start looking around for the different kinds of. They have many different kinds of services breakdowns, and if you dig around too, and if you're having trouble, you can find phone numbers where people will walk you through where to find what you want. I've used that in the past. It's very helpful.
Great. Here's one question specifically to Herman. You have been a leader in your work for 30 years, not you specifically, Herman, Mackay, with your cable software. How do you keep up with global competitors? And also, how do you internationalize your software for countries that are non-English language?
Yeah, good question. So the first part of that question, how do we keep up with global competitors? The way that we do it is we are constantly updating our software. So we have a team of about 6 engineers and software developers that are their whole job is to add new features to our software. And that is something I would definitely recommend to anyone that has a product like that, is to just stay ahead of the competition. So we are talking with our clients on every cable lay. After every installation, we'll say, how did it go? Is there anything, were there any issues? Is there anything that would make your life better? And they will come to us, and we have a good relationship with these clients, and they'll say, yeah, the installation went well, but what would be really nice to have is this feature. And we will immediately, if it makes commercial sense, we'll add it to our calendar of, a task that we want to complete and a feature that we want to add. So because of that, we haven't really had competitors globally. We're just, as long as you're staying ahead of the curve, it's going to be too much effort basically for a competitor to come in and try to develop something that we've spent 30 years developing. And then the second part of that question was, sorry, what was that again?
So
the second part.
Is the software in English, or how would you localize it for, say, a Japanese customer, Chinese customer?
Yeah, so our clients are still engineers. So in most of the markets that we are going to, most engineers still are speaking English. It's kind of the international design language, I'd say, for us. So we haven't had to translate our software itself. The other part of that, though, is we have a very nice graphical interface. So using images and something that you don't really need a lot of words to kind of navigate through the software. That's another way to kind of get past that language barrier. Even if they do speak English, it is often their second language. So our software itself doesn't have translations. We have in the past translated some brochures to some of the key markets that we go into. That's one way, because often let's say some of the decision makers on if they want to spend a decent amount of money on this software, they might not speak as great of English, let's say, as the actual engineers and users would. So that's one way where we kind of get into the market in their native language, but then again our software stays in English.
Thank you. Robert, is that the same in the architecture world?
We don't have the issue like that, because most of our service or designs being conducted overseas, out of the exporting markets. So we don't have that license issue and so on. But we do have some compatibilities with the local local architecture firm, because they have to take over our design and then convert it into blueprints, we call construction documents. So sometimes we can, oftentimes actually they use probably even more latest version than we do. So we just find a way to make it more compatible, and it's doable. There's no license issue.
How do both of your companies handle imperial units versus metric units when you're exporting products? I mean, in my own career, I find that to be a big problem selling US products into Asia, for example.
Yeah, we adapt in our case. So our guys are pretty much trained. I can tell you, interesting. After a while, we use the metric system. Our guys in the States, they love it. So why can't we change it?
Right. Is that the same for Mackay?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. Engineers like the metric system for sure. Makes life
Casey,
easy.
have you heard that before from other service exporters? Is that an issue?
I haven't heard that, but anecdotally, I mentioned to you before that I lived in China for about 9 years, and I came to really like the metric system myself, purely on a personal basis.
Right on.
Great. Okay. Oh, one last question for her. Everybody will have an opportunity here. Herman, are your software engineers and developers all in Hawaii?
No, so they've all started in Hawaii. They've all started at our office on the pier here, but due to some lifestyle changes and stuff, people have moved, and they were just too good for us to let go. So we have one in Japan. She's originally from Japan, and she wanted to move back with her husband. Which is actually it was actually a good move for us because a lot of the cable installers are based out of Japan as well. So it was kind of a win-win on both sides. And then the leader of that group actually is based out of Texas. So that group has been working kind of remote, has been a remote team for maybe 10 years now. So they were doing it before COVID, before it was cool, let's say. Yeah, we have a couple people sprinkled all around. And for software development, you don't really need that in-person, that in-office work life. So yeah, it just worked out for that group. Other groups like our hardware development, obviously it wouldn't be possible. So most of those teams are on site.
Great. And Robert, I know, of course, you have architects here in Hawaii, but you have some in the Singapore office and elsewhere. Is that correct?
That's true. Those are the offices we set up. We also, as Herman said, like their practice, we really go after where the talents are, even if we don't have a presence in that particular locale, we try to accommodate. So I think the pandemic also helped to facilitate these arrangements even further.
Okay. And Casey, we can finalize with this. If you know the answer, this might be a little complicated, but let's say in a situation like Robert's company where they have an office in Singapore, it's owned by or managed by the Hawaii office. The work that's done in Singapore on behalf of that US company, is that an export?
My understanding is that it would be an export. It would be an affiliate transaction through a US owned affiliate.
Great. Okay, great. Just very quickly before we wrap up, I'd like to make sure we go through your company website so anybody can, attendees can find out how to find you. So here's Casey's organization, the Coalition of Services Industries, and you're based in Washington, D.C. I've had a couple people text me and ask me for your contact information that are interested in membership of the organization. So I'll send that to them after the meeting.
Sure, happy to do that. Thank you.
And Robert's organization, WAT.
Perfect.
Great.
Yeah.
Where is this? This is beautiful. I think I've seen this before. I just can't remember where it is.
This is in London. We call Green Block. Our landscape team taking a high street in the mega cities in London. We did it in New York, Honolulu, and London. and then use our imagination how to make that street much greener than it is, to showcase the very urban, high energy, high activity areas can go very ecological.
That's great. And then Herman's company, Mackay Ocean Engineering here. Here's cables being laid and seawater air conditioning. Wonderful. So I'd like to thank everybody again for attending, and very much I'd like to thank Casey Swanson, Robert Jang, and Herman Kugler for being our speakers today. Extremely informative panel. We greatly appreciate your time and effort. We know you're busy, and it was just fantastic information. So thanks again for that. And with that, I'd like to wrap up again. In about a week, I'll have this recording edited and up on our YouTube archive here of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council's webinars. Thanks again to Mark Ritchie and the DBET staff. So have a wonderful day, everybody. Aloha.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank
Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.